I mean, he's on the phone. Wouldn't you think that you would have seen Nolan on the bottom on the floor or something? Or scrambling around, or everybody in a small space on the boat looking at him or something. I mean,
What an absolute wild thing to say when so many people have seen this video and slowed it down and noticed that there's either like a hand or a foot or something that comes flying up when they tug on the toe right there. Like, I can't believe that they said that. But please, please, please put out this interview. Please give me something to tear apart. Y'all, I swear I see Warren stop breathing when he starts this sentence, and he doesn't move again until he closes it out. Watch.
Water.
The Gulf does not bargain. 10 miles beyond the Mississippi shoreline, the water decides what disappears beneath it, and when, or whether, anything comes back. It offers no explanation for either choice. On the 4th of July, it took an 18-year-old from Ocean Springs. For 2 days, the water kept him out of sight. Then, on the morning of July 6th, Nolan Xavier Wells was found along the short line of Horn Island, surrounded by strangers and search crews, but not by the one person who had been waiting desperately to bring her son home. Nolan was supposed to turn 19 the following Wednesday. Try to imagine what that date means inside a home in Ocean Springs now. A mother standing only days away from her son's birthday, knowing there will be no celebration, no phone call, no Nolan walking through the door. 6 weeks have passed and she still cannot publicly explain how her son died. And according to the information presented in this case, the problem is not simply that an answer has been difficult to find. It is that the answer has not been made public. Nolan had been a wide receiver at Southwest Mississippi Community College after graduating from Ocean Springs High School with the class of 2025. But there is another detail about him that sounds almost insignificant until you place it inside the timeline. Nolan did not drive. Remember that. Because for an 18-year-old who does not drive, ordinary life depends on other people. Someone has to take you to practice. Someone has to pick you up. Someone has to decide whether you're coming to the party. Someone else usually determines how you get home. On July 4th, someone said yes. Nolan boarded a boat with friends and headed roughly 10 miles offshore toward a barrier island to watch the holiday fireworks. Nothing about that plan sounds unusual for a teenager along the Mississippi coast on Independence Day. But Nolan never made it home. And 6 weeks later, the case has produced something almost as unsettling as the disappearance itself. There have been 2 autopsies. One was arranged independently for the family. The other was performed by the state of Mississippi. 2 examinations, 2 sets of medical professionals, multiple layers of forensic review, and yet there has been no publicly released determination explaining exactly how Nolan died. The family's independent examination reportedly listed the cause and manner of death as undetermined while the investigation continued. The state completed its autopsy near the end of July, but that report has remained sealed. District Attorney Angel Nears Mr. Aff has said the document will remain confidential until it is presented to a grand jury. Her office has also stated that deaths in the county, outside natural deaths and certain non-criminal accidents, are routinely referred for grand jury consideration. Then there is the investigation itself. Approximately 60 witnesses have reportedly been interviewed. The FBI became involved in examining digital evidence, and the sheriff's office initially said that no evidence of foul play had been identified. But investigators later asked the public to submit original, unedited photographs and videos from Horn Island, specifically requesting material that might capture an altercation. Both statements exist within the public record. And placed side by side, they create an uncomfortable question. If investigators had not identified evidence of foul play, why was the public being asked to provide footage that might reveal one? For Nolan's mother, that question has never been academic. For 6 weeks, she has continued appearing publicly with a request that is far simpler than punishment. She wants the record. She wants to know what happened during the final hours of her son's life. She is not asking the public to decide who is guilty. She is asking for the information that might explain how an ordinary 4th of July trip ended with her son dead. And while the official investigation has moved forward behind closed doors, public speculation has moved in the opposite direction. Because when records disappear from public view, people begin searching for answers elsewhere. Online researchers started collecting original footage. They slowed videos down frame by frame. They adjusted exposure. They studied boats, people, positions, timestamps, and movements, trying to reconstruct what happened on July 4th from whatever material remained available. That is where the analysis you are about to see comes in. Before we show it, there is one distinction that cannot be ignored. What follows is a researcher's interpretation of publicly available material. It is not a court finding. It has not been adopted by investigators. Law enforcement has not confirmed the conclusions being presented, and critically, no one named in connection with the case has been charged with a crime. The attorneys representing the 3 young men who were aboard the boat have repeatedly maintained that their clients are innocent, and have described their relationship with Nolan as close and brother-like. Those statements matter. So does the research. That is why we are going to show the breakdown, rather than tell you what to believe. Watch the footage carefully. Listen to the interpretation. Look at what is actually visible before deciding what it means. Then stay with me. Because when the analysis ends, we are going to take every major claim it raises and compare it against what investigators have officially established. Some details may appear stronger than others, some may have explanations, and some questions may remain exactly where they were at the beginning. Because Nolan is dead, the state's report is still sealed. And until the evidence is placed in the open, the distance between what people believe happened and what can actually be proven remains the most important part of the story.
Wouldn't you think that you would have seen Nolan on the bottom of on the floor or something, or scrambling around, or everybody in a small space on the boat looking at him or something? I mean,
What an absolute wild thing to say when so many people have seen this video and slowed it down and noticed that there's either like a hand or a foot or something that comes flying up when they tug on the toe right there. Like, I can't believe that they said that. But please, please, please put out this interview. Please give me something to tear apart. Y'all, I swear I see Warren stop breathing when he starts this sentence, and he doesn't move again until he closes it out. Watch. They try to cover it up with an edit.
On the phone, wouldn't you think that you would have seen Nolan on the bottom of on the floor or something, or scrambling around, or everybody in a small space on the boat looking at him or something? I mean, that.
Let's go through a speed run of the information. We can now definitively say that this is Jax. We can also now definitively say that this is Morgan. He's wearing the same hat as well as the same bracelets. So where were they on the Triton? Now that we've got a much clearer video thanks to Officer Tatum, it's obvious that there is nobody in an orange swimsuit or a paisley swimsuit on this boat. We also barely see that there's somebody here in the red shorts. Now in this Katie Snapchat picture, I've been saying that there was somebody in the background here wearing red shorts. So I pumped up the exposure, and as you can see, it certainly looks like it. They seemingly have similar body types as well as similar hairlines. We also know that whoever was in the red shorts was also on the shoreline when the fight broke out. Now who was involved in that fight? Warren's brother, Carter. Carter, who trains in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And by Warren's own admission, his brother put someone in an arm bar. And in case you don't know what that looks like, go ahead and look at that placement on the back of the head there. Spot look familiar? Given Carter's height, build, body type, this looks like it could be him. But one blurry, underexposed picture is not solid proof of anything, right? But we know Warren grabbed his younger brother and had him come over hang out with them on their boat as they were sinking or whatever. And it would be pretty bad for their case if this was Carter on the Triton and then on Katie's boat at 6 o'clock. But now my attention turns to this person who a lot of people think is Bart. But in his hand, he is holding a cell phone. So I thought, why would Bart jump from his boat to the other boat holding a cell phone when other people have cell phones in their hands while Wyatt is on the phone in the picture? So while I was trying to compare pictures of Bart to the person on the boat that I can't identify, I found this picture with him with a tattoo from about 2 years ago. And it wasn't until just today that I stopped looking at the tattoo and I started looking at his wrist. Because someone in the background of this picture has always stuck out to me, because my instinct always was like, is that Bart? Bart seemingly has a pretty pronounced mullet, as according to this picture. But this was definitely not on Bart's boat. I checked the seating and the covers, like it's not Bart's boat. Now, I think you pretty much get where I'm going with this, because then I remembered this bracelet. Pretty unique bracelet. Unique like the bracelet that Bart Jr. was wearing in that tattoo picture. And right here looks like it might be the tail end of a tattoo that wraps around the forearm, right in the same place that it would be on Bart. I've said for a while now that the story about them calling Bart that morning to go out on the boat never made sense, because what 21-year-old didn't already have plans for 4th of July? So then the question is, who is driving Bart's boat? Which brings me back to this guy who some people have thought looked like Bart. However, we do know that he was on Bart's boat handing out drinks to people in that 7-second clip we've seen. Same hair, same glasses, same hat. By the way, did y'all know that Bart has a younger brother? The family resemblance is very striking. I mean, the real difference is that he's a little bit shorter and has a squarer jaw. And does anybody want to guess what his younger brother's name is? Brooks. Now, I seem to remember, and I can't remember exactly the context, a certain somebody talking in an interview about his buddy Brooks. Here's your reminder to check out my bio if you want to support my work. Folks, I have really outdone myself because I'm sure you're here wanting my take on part 2 of the interview, but we're not going to talk about that. Trust me, you're gonna wanna be sad. Thanks to this interview, I was able to finally, definitively put faces and names together, and then it hit me. We now know for sure that this is Jax, and now we know for sure that this is Morgan. He's literally wearing the same hat and the exact same armbands. So why aren't they on the Triton? A very unique blue swimsuit and an orange and yellow swimsuit. And now, thanks to Officer Tatum, we finally have a very clear video of them calling for the sea tow, and I don't see an orange swimsuit anywhere. I don't see a paisley swimsuit anywhere. So where are Jax and Morgan on this boat? We see what looks like Jax cuddling up to Katie on Bart's boat. So is this Bart over on their boat? Because here he was in that video handing out beers from his boat, and the sunglasses and the hat look the same. But what if it's not? Just stick with me, I'm going to come back around to it. Because now I want to talk about Warren's 17-year-old brother, Carter. Carter, who we know got into a fight with someone and put someone in an armbar on the shore. Carter, who Warren said he told to come over and hang out with all of them and chill out. Carter, who practices Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Notice the hand placement. And if you're like me, I had to go look up and see what an armbar exactly is and how it is done. And oh, look at the placement of that arm. Yeah. Now this seems to me like it definitely could be Carter. Picture was just taken in December, so the haircut, the hairline, the body type, all of it. We also know that the person in the red shorts were on the shore when the fight happened. Now y'all remember this picture, the Katie Snapchat pictures? Well, I brightened it up. All I did was just pump up the exposure, nothing else, and look in the background here. Oh, red shorts, just like I said. Lighter colored hair with a very familiar looking back of the neck. Now, of course, I'm not saying whether this is or isn't Carter. Boy, this wouldn't look good for anybody if this is Carter on Katie's boat at 6:02. But you know, one underexposed, blurry picture a smoking gun does not make. Unless somebody with a very unique haircut and a very distinct piece of jewelry happens to show up in one of these pictures. Because Mullet Boy here has always bothered me because for some reason he's wearing what looks like jeans. Not saying they are jeans, just can't definitively prove one way or the other whether they are or not, or if it's just the design of the swim trunks. When I went back through some of the photos I had collected of Bart Jr. to try and figure out if this was him or not, I found this picture I had archived. Thanks to the tattoo in this picture, which is the reason I screen grabbed it, that's why I'm like, I don't think this is Bart, because I feel like I would see the tattoo there, but and mind you, this picture is a couple of years old, but I just kind of wanted a timeline for this tattoo for identification purposes. And then I stopped getting distracted by the tattoo on his arm and I looked at the bracelet on his wrist. Pretty unique set of bracelets, right? I mean, hopefully by now you've figured out where I'm going with this. Why, what a unique set of bracelets. So between the mullet and these bracelets, someone may come to the conclusion that Katie and Bart were on a boat together. Maybe not Bart's boat, because after all, they're claiming that this boat belonged to a Marty McGrath, who was the one who came and got people. But if that's Bart here, then who was driving Bart's boat? Did you guys know that Bart has a younger brother? Very similar looking, but I'll tell you what. Very different jawlines, almost like the jawline of this person on the Triton. And guess what his brother's name is? Brooks. Now, where have I heard that before? Hasn't somebody talked about my buddy Brooks in previous interviews? I always said the whole "we called Bart that morning" story didn't make fucking sense. I have a theory that I'm flushing out. But thanks for doing this interview, guys. Wouldn't have been able to figure this out without you. But you know, since we're all liars and grifters anyway, just a reminder to everybody to check out my link in my bio if you want to support my work. I told you that lawyer was giving away the game when he kept saying just their 3 names over and over again. What do you mean it's a quote from a mob movie?
Because if you don't do that, once you're in court, now you just can't leave. Now you just can't leave.
Maybe if you're trying to convince the general public that these boys are innocent, don't quote a mob movie in which they then beat up a bunch of bikers at a bar. And it's seems quite obvious to me that this lawyer, instead of, presenting evidence that would help exonerate them in the public eye, like showing the actual security cam footage of when they came home or the text messages with Katie, no. Instead, we're going to keep it focused on race, which you can see by this clip.
People are pushing the narrative of, oh, this is a race thing. Well, obviously it's not. I mean, this is like a brother to us. I mean, Nolan's no different than anyone else in our group.
I also want to say, I think it's so criminal that they took something so anti-racist and flipped it into something super racist. Like they took, this is the definition of anti-racism. I mean, that we did not look at Nolan any different than I looked at him, or even you.
Okay, first off, that even you was wild. It's quite clear from that sentence that Jax has never had an actual conversation about racism in his entire life. I was friends with a black person. That's the most anti-racist anybody's ever been. This situation was the most unracist thing that's ever existed. It's the media. They're the ones making this racist. No, you don't understand what that means. It means your story doesn't hold water, and when people called you out on it and called out the investigation on not even investigating, that is systematic racism. It's very, very clear to me that the lawyer is the one telling them to keep the focus on race. Because you can see the lawyer and the gears in his head turning and nodding and agreeing along with all of the racial stuff. And you can see him kind of being like, yeah, okay, that's what I'm saying, yeah. So it's very clear that that was one of the bullet points that the lawyer told them to hit home over. And another one was the Coast Guard. Why would I call the Coast Guard if I knew he was dead? I called the Coast Guard right away. First off, you didn't. You waited till 11 o'clock. Second, it's not like the Coast Guard searched for him that night. Warren clung to that like it was a safety raft.
I think from the beginning, I'm glad that I called the Coast Guard. It would have been completely different. I'm glad I called the Coast Guard.
It's like, I'm sorry, Warren, but it's actually way more suspicious that you called the Coast Guard. Because first, you didn't want to call the Coast Guard when you guys were sinking. And then for some reason, you assumed that Nolan was still out on the island at 11 o'clock at night. Why wouldn't you assume that he came back with the person he was supposed to come back with and something happened to him in transit? Because no reasonable person would think that he was still out on the island, in my opinion. Because in your own words, Warren, you said you didn't talk to Katie till the next day. And then speaking of the island, the lawyer tries to say that by them going to the island and looking around, that it absolutely exonerates them and that the narrative couldn't be this, and ends it with a wild statement, mind you.
People who have been sucking up way more oxygen than they're entitled to have not been to the island. I'm willing to bet that a lot of the hustlers and profiteers and liars have not been to that island, and you have to go to that island. And being at the island today was revelatory. It was really illuminating. It's a very dynamic marine environment, first of all. But when you go to the island, you see instantly that what some people want to be true, what they wish to be true, they're trying to wish it to be true, they're trying to make it true through their lives. It's actually not possible. It is a very, very long and narrow barrier island. It's basically very low sand dunes. And the particular part of the island that we're dealing with, there are no trees. It's hardly any foliage, hardly any tree cover, hardly any plants, and it's wide open. And on July 4th, there were thousands of people there. There is no possible way that anybody could have committed a murder in broad daylight.
Murder? Who's saying anything about a murder? Most of us are under the assumption that an accident happened and they covered it up. All of this stuff that they keep trying to point to as evidence that they didn't do anything to him are not actually evidence. You know what is evidence? The security cam footage. Explain to us why the grandfather was the one who canceled the sea tow. How about that? And what I see is just a complete lack of responsibility with these boys. Because listen to this phrasing.
I wish we would have never, I think about this every day. I wish we would have never went out on the 4th of July because I know this wouldn't have happened.
You see, instead of saying, I should have made sure my friend got home safely, they said, I wish we had never gone out. And I have to admit, my little antennas buzzed a little when it sounded like he was going to say, I knew this was going to happen, right? That seems like what he was going to say. It wasn't, maybe we shouldn't have been underage drinking. They literally say, we did everything right.
I mean, there's not much I would change from my point of view and my friend's point of view. I think we did everything right, and I know we did nothing wrong.
Those are not the words of somebody who lost their brother, their best friend, a month ago. And I lost one of my closest friends in a non-suspicious way. I blamed myself, even though I hadn't even physically seen her in a couple of years. And for those of you guys saying that Jax is the one that people should press, I fully disagree. He is the one that I think is the scariest out of these interviews. Watch the way he looks at Warren during this moment.
We live in a very tight knit community, and for people to, push back and say these things when they know what Ocean Springs is like, it's really hard. And I mean, I haven't had many personal encounters, but I know being around the
Oh, he felt like he was saying something to Warren. Because let's not forget, it was his grandparents' house that they all got together at. It was his grandparents' house that they went back to, and thus should have security cam footage from. And out of all of them, Jax is the one that is holding his body in a different way, who is more controlled, more level-headed. If these kids were truly looking to exonerate themselves, they would actually start addressing some of these questions, like, who was the fourth boat? Why were all of you huddled up out there together? Who drove the fucking Palm Beach? Alright, let's try recording this video for the third time. First off, what in the cosplay was this lawyer doing? As if he isn't a lawyer from New York. He's just throwing on some good old boy dog whistle clothes. What I've seen so far, this was a weird interview. From the baseball signals he was giving, watching these boys as if he was their warden, and wearing a hat advertising the law firm that you're working with is weird. But this lawyer kind of proved my point a little bit when I suspected that he wasn't going to be a very good lawyer and just was actually a bully behind the scenes. Because did y'all pick up on this?
About Morgan, Jax, and Warren, I'm not going to call them untruths or half-truths or falsehoods. I'm going to call it what it is, lies. Morgan, Warren, and Jax left the island at about 4:30 p.m. That's it.
Yeah, did anybody else pick up on him constantly repeating Morgan, Jax, and Warren? Morgan, Jax, and Warren are innocent. Morgan, Jax, and Warren left at 4:30. That language is intentional. He is intentionally excluding all the other people on the boat, all the other people that went to the beach. And you might notice he conveniently left out the brother in all of this. Aren't you also representing his brother? And yet you intentionally say stuff like this.
Morgan, if you lied about Jax, if you lied about Warren, we're going to get you. And you're going to be hauled into court, you're going to be held accountable, and it's going to be very painful. And what I would say to the people who have done that is, now's your chance. If you want to apologize and retract before you find yourself in court, you should probably do that now. Because if you don't do that, once you're in court, now you just can't leave. You won't be able to get out of it. And we're not going to name names because there's some other folks who are doing that, and we want to be better than that. And I want to emphasize this, right? We're not here to guess. We're not here to speculate. We're only going to deal in facts, right? And here's the most important thing, right? We don't know how Nolan Wells died. No one here is saying we know. But what we do know is Morgan, Jax, and Warren had nothing whatsoever to do with Nolan Wells' death.
Did you see it? Did you see how they intentionally left out so many people? And I thought he drowned. It was an accident, right? Isn't it weird how in none of these interviews they're ever like, this was an awful accident. We should have made better choices that day and looked out for our friend, but in the end, he drowned. And can we just talk for a second about the weird laugh they did there? Let's show it again.
If you don't do that, once you're in court, now you just can't leave. You won't be able to get out of it.
What the hell was so funny about that? That was the mask slipping, y'all. That's how they really feel about all of this. There's no logical reason a lawyer would actually advise any of their clients to go and keep doing these interviews, because this is all just a media PR stunt. They know that they're never going to be held accountable, but they are just so worried about their name being Googleable that they're desperately trying to send up the signal to try and revamp their public image. This whole interview, in my opinion, is just the lawyer doing what I thought he would try to do and bully and intimidate people into silence. Because as someone who has gotten several cease and desists in my life, they don't give you warnings. They don't tell you, oh, you better retract it or else we're gonna then get you to court. No, a cease and desist is your warning. A warning that means nothing. Personally, I don't think there's gonna be a single person that they ever bring to court for defamation. And if anything, this lawyer repeating over and over just Morgan, Jax, and Warren implies that what he's actually saying in lawyer speak is that these are the only three with clean hands. Which is why, again, it is so weird that his brother is not included in this list. I've I've got a lot more to say about this interview, so I'll be making another video today for sure. But one thing I need to say is, if you really want to keep coming on here and proclaiming your innocence, why don't you actually show us the evidence that you claim that you have? Show us the text messages with Katie. Jack's buddy, go ahead and show us that security cam footage of all y'all coming home. Feels like that would be the most definitive way to shut us up now, wouldn't it? Until you do that, nobody feels bad that you can't buy a fucking Gatorade. Nolan is dead. My bad, folks. I've got to re-upload the video because I accidentally left something in it, so I had to re-edit it. But here we go. Let's try it again. This was the most bizarre good old boy cosplay I have ever seen in my life. Let's keep in mind that that Trump lawyer that they hired is from New York, and I have never seen a lawyer sit down with their clients and do an interview with them in the least professional attire I have ever seen, while also advertising another law firm on their hat. We all saw how weird this interview was, right? It was like a prison warden keeping checks on them. And not only was he doing the weird baseball signals throughout the interview, not only was he in the most defensive position out of anybody in this group, after I watched this interview, he kind of proved me right in that I think he's a bad lawyer who's using bullying tactics behind the scene, and that's what he's good at. Because did anybody else pick up on this?
About Morgan, Jax, and Warren, I'm not going to call them untruths or half-truths or falsehoods. I'm going to call it what it is, lies. Morgan, Warren, and Jax left the island at about 4:30 p.m. That's it.
Did anybody else pick up on that? That over and over again, he was specifically saying Morgan, Jax, and Warren, blah, blah, blah. They didn't do anything. They left the island at 4:30. If you're telling lies about them, you're in trouble. He's intentionally and purposely omitting everybody else that was on the boat, everybody else that was in the group that day. And that right there is very telling to me. Now, I personally do not see the logic in the lawyer advising these boys to do another interview, unless it's to try and threaten and intimidate the people that they're gonna go after for defamation. Because they keep saying this over and over again. We're gonna sue for defamation. We're gonna bring these people in and we're gonna sue them. And at one point, the lawyer even says this.
Morgan, if you lied about Jax, if you lied about Warren, we're going to get you. And you're going to be hauled into court. You're going to be held accountable. And it's going to be very painful. And what I would say to the people who have done that is, now's your chance. If you want to apologize and retract before you find yourself in court, you should probably do that now. Because if you don't do that, once you're in court, now you just can't leave. You won't be able to get out of it. And we're not going to name names because there's some other folks who are doing that, and we want to be better than that. And I want to emphasize this, right? We're not here to guess. We're not here to speculate. We're only going to deal in facts, right? And here's the most important thing, right? We don't know how Nolan Wells died. No one here is saying we know. But what we do know is Morgan, Jax, and Warren had nothing whatsoever to do with Nolan Wells' death.
Once again, being overly specific and giving away the game. Oh, if you lie about Morgan and Jax and Warren, we're gonna haul you into court. We don't know anything, but Morgan, Jax, and Warren are innocent. But I thought he drowned. Aren't they all innocent? Isn't it all just a terrible accident? Notice how not once has anybody in any of these interviews said that this was just a tragic accident. And mind you, if they were actually being defamed, those letters would have been sent out. They wouldn't go and give an interview warning people, you better retract it or then we're gonna come for you. As someone who has had several cease and desist letters sent to them, they don't warn you. Because cease and desist letters in themselves don't matter. They aren't anything. They are the warning. What was that weird fucking laugh they all had together?
Once you're in court, now you just can't leave. You won't be able to get out of it.
That was the mask slipping. That was them showing us who they really are. I've got a ton more I want to say about this interview so far, but I think it's important that we need to keep the pressure on because look at Warren is crumbling. He's literally wearing the same shirt that he wore in the last interview when they went to the island, and just look at the difference. Personally, I think it's important that if we are going to be giving Officer Tatum the views on these videos, that we need to be expressing our opinions in the comment section, not fighting with people. And I can't help but wonder why Warren's brother was left out of all of those proclamations. Just something to think about.
Then there is the question investigators have never fully resolved in public. How could the phrase "no foul play" come from the sheriff's office before the medical examination was complete? Not afterward. Before. Who made the decision to use those words? What information was available to investigators at the time? And what exactly did officials know when that statement entered the public conversation? Because later, that same law enforcement office asked the public to provide original, unedited footage from Horn Island, including videos that might show altercations. Those two moments deserve to be examined together. If investigators had not identified evidence of foul play, what prompted them to specifically seek footage that could potentially reveal one? There is no need to invent an answer. The contradiction itself is enough to raise the question. Then there is the forensic record. Nolan's body has undergone two separate examinations, one performed through the state and another obtained independently for his family. And despite those examinations, the publicly described conclusion from the family's examination remained undetermined. That word matters, because undetermined does not automatically mean that someone discovered evidence of a crime. It also does not prove that investigators ignored something. In forensic medicine, an undetermined conclusion can mean that the available evidence does not allow a definitive cause or manner of death to be established. But in this case, the public still does not know what the state's completed examination concluded. The state report was reportedly finished near the end of July. It remains sealed. The district attorney has explained that the report will be presented to a grand jury, and that this process is consistent with how qualifying deaths are handled in the county. That may be standard procedure. But procedure does not erase the human cost of waiting. For Nolan's mother, Christine Wansley, weeks have passed without the public explanation she has been asking for. A sealed document may represent one step in the legal process. To a grieving parent, it can feel like another barrier between her and the final hours of her child's life, and that distinction is where the frustration becomes impossible to ignore. Then consider the scale of the investigation. Around 60 witnesses have reportedly been interviewed. The FBI has been assisting with digital evidence. Those are not the signs of an investigation that simply ended after an initial conclusion. So what exactly is the public supposed to make of the gap between the early statement and everything that came afterward? Because there are still basic questions surrounding Nolan's final hours. Why was he without his phone? What information could that phone contain? Who has examined its data? What has been recovered? And what remains unexplained? There are also questions about the people who were with Nolan during that trip. Questions the public has continued to debate, even though no one should be treated as guilty without evidence or charges. Then another pattern becomes impossible to miss. Much of the public battle surrounding this case has unfolded through attorneys and statements rather than through investigators publicly explaining the evidence. Lawsuits, online accusations, public defenses. But very little definitive information about what the forensic record actually shows. That shift matters because it can move attention away from the central issue. Nolan on the side of the Wells. Lawsuits are more likely to focus on the one day in the cars and the other. And why does the public still know so little about them? There is also a broader question some members of the public have raised about race and whether the response to Nolan's death would have unfolded differently under different circumstances. That question should not be treated as proof of discrimination. There is not enough public evidence to make that conclusion. But asking whether race influenced the speed, language, or transparency of an investigation is different from declaring that it did. It is a question, and questions are exactly what remain. Because nobody watching from behind a screen can honestly claim to know what happened on Horn Island that 4th of July, not from a slowed-down video, not from an online theory, not from a social media post, and certainly not from speculation presented as certainty. What can be said is much simpler. The grand jury has not publicly resolved the matter, the state autopsy report has not been released, the questions surrounding Nolan's phone remain. And his mother is still waiting for an explanation of how her son died. So this case should not be treated as solved simply because an early statement said there was no identified foul play. It should not be treated as proof of a crime either. There remains an open investigation, with major pieces of the official record still unavailable to the public. Until those pieces are examined, the most responsible conclusion is also the safety one. Most frustrating one, we do not know yet. But the unanswered questions are still there, and until the evidence is made clear, the story of Nolan Wells is not finished.